Picture the scene. It's about 120,000 years ago, somewhere in Africa. You are technically a human being. You have a big brain, clever hands, and precisely 0 items of clothing, because the concept of an outfit has not yet been invented. You are just out here, fully exposed, vibing with the sunrise like it's completely normal, because for you, it is. And if someone traveled back in time and told you that one day your descendants would own 11 pairs of shoes and still complain they have nothing to wear, you would not understand a single word of it. This is the story of when humans first started wearing clothes. And I have to warn you up front, this is one of the hardest questions in all of archaeology, for one incredibly annoying reason. Clothes don't fossilize. A stone tool can sit in the ground for 2 million years and come out basically fine. But animal hide, plant fiber, leather, fur, it rots, it crumbles, it vanishes completely within a few thousand years, under normal conditions. So the very first thing a human ever wore disintegrated long before anyone could dig it up. Which means dating the invention of clothing is less like reading a history book and more like solving a murder, where the body, the weapon, and the crime scene have all dissolved. So how do we solve it? We follow the clues, and the first clue is possibly the most disgusting piece of evidence in all of science. Lice. I promise this goes somewhere. Here is the thing you never wanted to know about your own body. Humans are host to more than one kind of louse. There are head lice, which live in the hair on your head, and there are body lice, which do not live on your body at all. They live in your clothing, in the seams, in the folds, in the fabric, crawling out only to feed. And this tiny detail turns out to be an accidental time machine. Because body lice cannot exist without clothes, there is nowhere for them to live on a naked human. So body lice could only have evolved after humans started wearing something regularly enough to create a cozy little fabric habitat for them. Scientists realized they could flip this around. If you figure out when body lice split off from head lice and became their own separate creature, you have basically found the moment humans got dressed. So they sequenced the DNA, ran the genetic clock backwards, and landed on a range somewhere between roughly 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Sit with that for a second. The most hated insect at every summer camp on Earth is also the star witness in the case of when we invented fashion. The lice were there. They saw the whole thing. They moved in and never left. Now hold that number, because the next clue makes everything more confusing, not less. Let's talk about the fact that you are, biologically speaking, a naked animal. Look at almost any other big mammal. Bears, wolves, gorillas, horses, lions. Every one of them is wrapped in a thick natural coat. And then there's us, standing in the middle of the animal kingdom, essentially bald, looking like we lost a bet. Here's the twist. We did not lose our fur recently. Our ancestors started shedding their body hair over 1 million years ago, most likely because as they walked and ran across hot, open savanna, a heavy fur coat was a one-way ticket to overheating and dying. So we traded fur for millions of sweat glands and became one of the sweatiest species alive. But notice the gap. We went bald over 1 million years ago. And the lice say we didn't get dressed until maybe 170,000 years ago at the earliest. That's a gap of hundreds of thousands of years where our ancestors were walking around naked and hairless and apparently completely fine with it. Which tells you something important. The first clothes were almost certainly not about staying warm. If cold were the trigger, we'd have covered up the instant we lost our fur. We didn't. So something else got us dressed first. Probably a mix of things. Basic protection from sun, thorns, insects, and scrapes. And, almost certainly, showing off. Because long before we had clothing, we had decoration. We've found chunks of red ochre pigment, ground down, and clearly used to paint the body, going back over 200,000 years, older than any evidence of clothing at all. Which means humans were decorating themselves before they were dressing themselves. And once you're already using your appearance to say, I belong to this group, or I killed something powerful, or you should be impressed by me, throwing a striking animal skin over your shoulders is a very small next step. The first coat may have been less about warmth and more about status. The world's first flex. Now for the third clue, and this one is a real object you can actually hold. For most of prehistory, Wearing clothes probably meant draping a hide over yourself and tying it with a strip of sinew. Effective, but crude. The prehistoric equivalent of wrapping yourself in a rug. Then, around 50,000 years ago, something changes in the archaeological record. Archaeologists start finding needles. Not just pointy tools, but actual sewing needles with a tiny hole carefully drilled through one end, made to pull thread through material. One of the oldest, found in a Siberian cave, was carved from bird bone and polished smooth about 50,000 years ago. And this little object represents a genuine leap in the human mind. Somebody looked at a splinter of bone and imagined a tool that didn't exist yet, figured out how to bore a clean hole through the skinny end without snapping it, and then used it to stitch two pieces of hide into a shape that actually fit the human body. That's not just survival, that's engineering. That's the birth of tailoring. And in the frozen north, a needle wasn't a luxury. Fitted, sewn, sealed clothing that trapped body heat was the difference between surviving a glacial winter and freezing to death in a single night. So now you see why this question has no clean answer. Draping a hide over yourself? Possibly very old and impossible to date. Wearing clothes regularly enough to breed a brand new parasite? Somewhere around 83,000 to 170,000 years ago. Sewing fitted, tailored garments? About 50,000 years ago. Every one of those is a different milestone in the same story, and they're spread across 100,000 years. And here's a detail that messes with the whole idea that this was uniquely our achievement. We weren't the only humans doing it. The Neanderthals, our stocky, cold-adapted cousins, were preparing animal hides with specialized tools well before they ever met us. And given the brutal Ice Age Europe they lived in, they absolutely had to be wearing them. There's even evidence pointing to the Denisovans, a mysterious third human species we only discovered from a single finger bone, making polished ornaments to decorate themselves. So the urge to cover and adorn the body wasn't one lucky idea from one species. Multiple kinds of humans, in different corners of the world, all arrived at the same solution. Which raises a slightly eerie question. Is clothing a human invention, or is it just what any smart, social, frequently freezing creature inevitably figures out? Then the climate forced the issue. Between roughly 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, the planet lurched through savage cold cycles. Ice sheets spread, huge stretches of Africa dried out, food collapsed, and our species may have crashed to as few as a few tens of thousands of individuals. We came genuinely close to going extinct before we ever really got going. And when the survivors finally began pushing north out of Africa into brutal cold, clothing stopped being a social accessory and became life support. The groups that already knew how to scrape a hide, cut it, layer it, and stitch it into something that sealed heat against the skin had a staggering survival advantage. They lived, they had children, they passed the skill down, and that knowledge, a second skin we could carry anywhere, is a big part of how a naked tropical ape ended up colonizing frozen continents on the other side of the world. So, when did humans start wearing clothes? The most honest answer is that there was never a single morning when someone invented the outfit. The best evidence, courtesy of a parasite, points to regular clothing somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Tailored, sewn clothing shows up around 50,000 years ago, and loose hides draped over cold shoulders were probably happening even earlier. We just can't prove exactly when, because the evidence quietly rotted away. What we do know is that by the time humans spread across the planet, we were already wrapping ourselves in meaning, not just fabric. And that's the part that never changed. Because whatever you pulled on this morning, you didn't choose it purely to survive. You chose it. It says something about your mood, your group, your status, the version of yourself you wanted the world to see today, which is the exact same thing that ancient human did, standing by a fire 100,000 years ago, wrapped in a painted hide, quietly hoping everyone noticed. 100,000 years of history, and the thread connecting you to them is simply this. You got dressed. So here's my question for you. If you had the choice, could you actually give it all up and live completely naked in the wild like your ancestors did? Be honest in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.